On November 19th, two gas tanks caught fire on a railway line between the Perm region and the Sverdlovsk region, according to the Sverdlovsk Railway Press Service. The incident took place on the Shamari to Cordon section, where two tank cars in the rear of a freight train ignited. Two firefighting trains were dispatched to contain the blaze. The flames were intense, and emergency crews worked for hours to prevent the fire from spreading further. Local outlets were quick to suggest the possibility of sabotage, though no evidence has been confirmed. The identity of any potential suspect remains unknown. The Kremlin has not commented, and Ukrainian officials have also remained silent. Train traffic along the route has been halted, and Russian Railways has warned passengers to expect delays. The Ural Transport Prosecutor's Office has opened an investigation to determine what happened. But for the Kremlin, the real issue is not who carried out the sabotage. It is why it wasn't stopped. More than 80% of Russia's logistics move by rail, and Perm serves as a key transit hub for fuel and military cargo heading to the Western fronts. Disrupting this line is more than an inconvenience. It strikes directly at the core of Russia's operational planning. This raises an unavoidable question: what is the FSB, the agency responsible for protecting critical infrastructure, actually doing? Instead of safeguarding essential routes, it has focused its resources on pursuing pro-Western dissidents and citizens who voice even minimal anti-war sentiment online. In prioritizing propaganda over security, the government has left its infrastructure exposed. This is where Putin faces a deeper problem. While building an extensive system of internal repression, the state has overlooked threats emerging from within its own borders. This growing threat has been described as a ghost army, a network that could include Ukrainian-backed sabotage groups or Russian citizens disillusioned with the war. Regardless of who is operating in the shadows, the outcome is the same. The FSB is failing to maintain internal security. If the Perm fire is ultimately confirmed as sabotage within the context of the ongoing conflict, it will expose persistent weaknesses in the security network meant to protect Russia's rail system. This infrastructure has repeatedly been targeted by UAV strikes and ground-based operations, and the latest incident underscores how vulnerable these routes have become. The Perm sabotage marks another setback for Russia's already strained energy distribution system. For months, Ukraine has focused on hitting Russian oil refineries. 21 of the country's 38 major facilities have come under attack, sharply cutting refining output. Ukrainian intelligence estimates that more than 38% of Moscow's processing capacity has been knocked out. Those were strikes from the air. The incident in Perm represents an attack from the ground, completing a 1-2 blow to Russia's fuel network. But the campaign did not start here. On November 1st, Ukraine's main intelligence directorate carried out an even more damaging operation. Saboteurs struck 3 key lines of a 400-kilometer military fuel pipeline ring in the Rumenskoye area, just outside Moscow. This pipeline supplied jet fuel, diesel, and gasoline, not only to civilian markets but also to major military facilities, including the Zhukovsky Flight Test Center, the Chkalovsky Special Transport Base, the Kubinka Fighter Squadron, and Moscow's air defense units. The coordinated destruction of all 3 lines, with a combined annual capacity of 3 million tons of jet fuel, shattered the image of Moscow as an untouchable stronghold. A sabotage team managed to breach the capital's defenses within only a few dozen kilometers. Now, neither the rail line in Perm nor the strategic pipeline encircling Moscow can be considered secure. The immediate impact of the incident was the suspension or delay of traffic along a major railway corridor. This line plays a central role in moving goods from Western Russia to Siberia and the Far East, including essential cargo such as fuel, metals, and industrial materials. Its disruption creates a ripple effect across multiple supply chains. For the Russian military, the situation is even more critical. The army depends heavily on road and rail networks to deliver fuel to frontline units. Both are now increasingly exposed to Ukrainian drone strikes, partisan activity, and the operations of the so-called ghost army. Pipelines, by contrast, move vast quantities of fuel quietly and efficiently. Replacing those volumes with truck transport is up to 15 times more expensive and can take weeks. A single incident, like the fire in Perm, can halt fuel deliveries to the entire Western Front for days. Meanwhile, the destruction of the Moscow Ring pipeline has had an immediate effect on the Air Force. Test flights for the Su-57 have slowed, training schedules for elite pilots have been reduced, and patrol aircraft operating over the capital have been forced to limit fuel use. 2 fuel tank cars were destroyed or left heavily damaged in the blaze. The surrounding rail infrastructure, including tracks, sleepers, and possibly overhead wiring, also suffered damage that will require significant repair. Because the fire occurred on a single track section, traffic through the area was fully halted for a period of time. The shutdown disrupted the schedules of numerous freight and passenger trains moving through the Urals, creating widespread delays. Civilians felt the consequences almost immediately. With more than a third of Russia's refinery capacity already offline and key distribution routes cut, gas stations began to run dry. The fuel limits in Crimea, the black market prices in Luhansk, and Rosneft's cap on truck refueling all point to the same issue. Fuel may still be produced, but it can no longer be reliably transported by pipeline, rail, or road. Truck drivers who once traveled long distances without concern now struggle to find fuel every few days. Factories have begun reducing shifts. Lines for bread and lines for gasoline have merged. As civilians queue with jerry cans, Russian armored units face their own shortages because the same tankers and rail cars serve both the public and the military. The problem has moved beyond a temporary delay. It has become a systemic breakdown. With the Russian army stretched across more than 1,200 kilometers of active front, fuel deliveries can no longer be made daily and have shifted to a weekly schedule at best. An army with tanks but no fuel is simply equipment without purpose. Aircraft sit grounded, armored vehicles remain idle, and rail lines continue to burn. Russia's domestic fuel market was already under severe strain. Gasoline prices had climbed to record levels since the start of the year, rising 49% for AI-95 and 38% for AI-92. These increases reflect a sharp and accelerating inflation crisis. At the same time, many gas stations have been forced to shut down because government antitrust rules prevent them from adjusting prices to cover their own costs. Rosneft, the country's largest state-controlled oil company, added further pressure by introducing a 200-litre diesel limit for trucks at all of its stations. On paper, the number may seem insignificant. In practice, it crippled long-distance transport. A modern long-haul truck can travel roughly 3,000 kilometers on a full tank, but with only 200 liters available, the range dropped to about 500 to 600 kilometers. Even the relatively short Moscow to St. Petersburg route became impossible to complete without refueling. The announcement triggered immediate chaos. Tens of thousands of truck drivers rushed to alternative stations, including Gazprom outlets, which had no such limits, and larger storage capacity. But these locations were never built to handle such a surge. Their tanks emptied within hours, and access roads became clogged with lines of trucks stretching for kilometers. As freight ground to a halt, store shelves emptied, prices soared, factories shut down, and millions of people were pushed deeper into poverty. Crimea has become one of the regions most severely affected by the fuel crisis. Local authorities imposed strict price caps and limited gasoline purchases to just 20 liters per customer. For residents earning minimum wage, even this small amount has become financially out of reach. Long lines stretch for kilometers outside gas stations, where people wait for hours or even days under the sun, holding worn metal cans and hoping supplies last long enough for their turn. More often than not, they face disappointment. Many arrive only to see fuel out signs posted before the line moves forward. Frustration has turned into desperation. With fuel nearly impossible to find, theft has surged. Residents began siphoning gasoline from parked cars at night. Social media quickly filled with warnings urging people to lock their fuel caps. This reality stands in stark contrast to the security Putin once claimed to guarantee. Instead, civilians now navigate an atmosphere of uncertainty in which they fear not foreign threats, but their own neighbors. Even those who manage to buy fuel report new problems. Many complain that the gasoline has become so poorly refined that it smells like paint and damages engines, adding another burden to an already collapsing system. The deepest financial damage behind Russia's fuel crisis stems from its own economic planning. The 2025 war budget was built on a single assumption, that Urals crude would average around $59 per barrel. But by mid-November 2025, the price had fallen sharply to about $36 to $37. This wiped out roughly one-third of the revenue the government expected to receive. The loss amounts to billions of dollars disappearing almost instantly. Energy remains the backbone of Russia's entire economy. Yet Putin's budget, shaped by overconfidence, could not withstand the volatility of the global oil market. The consequences are severe. Despite being one of the world's largest energy exporters, Russia now risks depending on imports for up to 60% of its fuel supply by the end of 2025. This vulnerability is the result of both Ukrainian strikes and growing internal sabotage. The question now is where Russia will source the missing fuel. China and Kazakhstan are the most likely suppliers, but both stand to gain from Russia's weakened position and will demand commercial and political concessions in return. The crisis has already forced Russia to import 49,000 tons of gasoline each month from Belarus just to meet basic domestic needs. A war that was supposed to end in days has instead pushed Moscow into relying on its neighbors for gasoline. The most serious consequences of the fuel crisis are now visible on the battlefield. To reduce the strain on supplies, the government has authorized refineries to create winter diesel by mixing summer diesel with kerosene. This is not a preventive measure, but a response driven by necessity. The head of Russia's largest private fuel supplier has already warned that this blend could push jet fuel prices higher and introduce new risks for aviation. Yet the Kremlin-controlled media presents a different picture. The Russian Gazette reported that foreign delegates were impressed by the capabilities of the new Su-57E stealth fighter showcased at the Dubai Air Show. Komsomolskaya Pravda highlighted plans for a nationwide high-speed rail network, suggesting a country in the midst of rapid development, untouched by war, sanctions, or economic slowdown. But stepping away from official broadcasts reveals a starkly different reality. While state television promotes visions of futuristic rail systems, citizens see lines shut down by burning fuel tankers and crippled infrastructure. Even members of Putin's long-standing inner circle are no longer able to ignore the scale of the crisis. German Gref is a prime example. He is not an opposition figure, nor a critic of the state. He is the CEO of Sberbank, Russia's largest financial institution, and formerly Putin's Minister for Economic Reforms. A technocrat shaped by the system, Gref has long been regarded as one of the Kremlin's most reliable experts. His recent remarks were not an act of rebellion, but a warning issued out of fear for the system's stability. According to statements leaked to outlets such as The Guardian and Medusa, Gref privately acknowledged that the current economic trajectory is unsustainable and that the effects of Western sanctions have become impossible to deny. In essence, this was a vote of no confidence in the president's economic strategy. Under normal circumstances, such blunt criticism would have cost Gref his position or led to criminal charges. Yet he remains in office. This suggests that Putin's authority is no longer unquestioned. Influential figures within the Kremlin appear more concerned about the system's potential collapse than about crossing the president. As ordinary citizens face empty shelves and rising prices, Gref's message to Putin is clear: the war economy is undermining the civilian economy. A single fire on a remote rail line triggered a chain reaction that spread far beyond the Urals. It exposed gaps in security, disrupted the military's supply chain, triggered economic turmoil, and deepened the hardships faced by civilians. Sabotage from the outside and discontent from within now converge at a moment when Russia's infrastructure, economy, and leadership structure are already weakened. While state media continues to promote images of strength and progress, the realities on the ground tell another story. Supply lines are unstable, fuel shortages are widespread, and even members of the elite are quietly voicing alarm. The contrast between propaganda and lived reality has become impossible to ignore. What do you think this scenario means for the months ahead? Does it reveal a turning point for Russia, or is it another stage in a longer decline? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thanks so much for hanging out with us today. Smash that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you'll be the first to catch our next drop. Your support truly means a lot. Take care and have a wonderful day.